Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to Data and AI Live. Thank you very much for joining us today, wherever you are in the world. Today's show, we're going to be talking about unlocking value, how private equity firms are learning to use data science. And our guest is Cory Eaves from Baypine, and we will introduce Cory shortly. Just a couple of housekeeping pieces for everyone out there. We are live and interactive, so when we're live, things can go wrong, streams can go down, fire alarms can go off, cleaners can walk into rooms, which has happened in the past. So if anything like that happens, just bear with us. We'll get back on track. But yeah, thank you again for joining us. Secondly, in terms of housekeeping, Cory and I will probably talk for about 30 minutes, and then the last 20 minutes we'll do a Q&A. But do get your questions in any time before that. So if there's questions on the top of your mind now, please put them in the comments down below. And anytime a question comes into your head at any time, just pop it into the comments down below. Don't wait till the Q&A at the end. And then last 20 minutes, we'll endeavour to get through all the questions if we can. So yeah, let me introduce Cory. Cory, good morning. Thanks very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Just to intro Cory for everyone, I'm sure some of you joining us know him, but Cory is partner and head of portfolio operations at Baypine. He's got a background as a CIO and CTO across a variety of different firms, including software firms, Misys and SSA Global. Prior to joining Baypine, Cory was one of the first operating partners at Global Atlantic, General Atlantic, sorry, where he helped build their portfolio value creation capabilities for 10 years plus, I believe. So we're very lucky to have him. And yeah, thanks again for joining us, Cory. Did I do you justice?
That's great. Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Excited to be here and have a good conversation this morning.
Great. Well, I thought probably a good place to kick off, Cory, is I'm sure a lot of the people joining us might know about Baypine, but some might not. So maybe you could give us an intro to Baypine and the Baypine story.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and again, thanks, Jeremy, for having me, and thanks to everyone who joined this morning. So yes, I joined Baypine about a year ago. Baypine, I joined, as Jeremy mentioned, from General Atlantic. And General Atlantic was a very large, successful firm, and I was excited to go try something new. And so Baypine is essentially a startup private equity fund. Always seems a little strange to describe it that way, but that's what we are. The fund was set up a few years ago with a really simple idea, and the idea was to invest in analog businesses and use technology to help them become digital. And it's a simple idea, but it's a sort of a unique idea in private equity. Most private equity firms either invest in technology companies, or they may invest in kind of analog and traditional businesses, but it's a little unusual to find a firm that wants to invest in analog businesses and help them become digital. So that's the mission of the firm. The firm was set up a few years ago by just really an amazing set of founders. Dave Rue founded Silver Lake. Anjan Mukherjee ran a large part of the Blackstone PE portfolio. And Steve Coe, one of the third founders, was a leading investor at KKR. I joined to head portfolio operations at the firm, as Jeremy mentioned, so I oversee all of our value creation initiatives. The firm raised its first fund not long ago. It broke a record for one of the largest first funds raised. We raised over $3.5 billion, if you include our various vehicles. And we're off to the races. We're building a new firm, investing, hiring people, and kind of building out the team. So it's been terrific to be here over the last year.
Fantastic. Thanks, Cory. And from your, I guess, give us an overview, and we'll probably get into this a bit more later as well, but how are Baypine thinking about data science?
Yeah. So I guess maybe a starting point here would be, we're thinking about technology really as a probably our single most important value creation lever as we make investments. It just goes right to the core of our mission of being able to do that. Within technology, we will definitely be using AI and data science to drive value in the portfolio companies. We're already doing that. We've made 4 investments, and maybe as we get into it here, I can talk about a few examples of where we're making that happen. But we're using data science actively for various projects in the portfolio. We're applying it earlier in the investment process to how we think about sourcing and finding new investment prospects. And then finally, we have internal initiatives here at the firm to apply data and AI to even how the firm itself operates. So it's going to be a big part of what we do. And we're just sort of getting started with it.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, we'll come back to and sort of delve into, I guess, how you're using it, maybe some specific examples later in the show. But perhaps a good place to start is that I know, as you will, that private equity is starting to sort of lean into data science more and more. Why do you think that is right now?
Yeah, I think you're right, Jeremy. I mean, I think what you're seeing a lot across a lot of private equity is they're trying to figure out how to apply data science and AI to what they're doing. I think it's for a couple of reasons. One is just the private equity industry is just terrifically competitive. I mean, so every firm is always looking for kind of any edge that they can get to generate returns and compete for deals. So I think that's a little bit inherent. There's a lot of trends in the private equity industry, I think, also that are, as interest rates rise, that are changing the focus in private equity from what has traditionally been a lot of financial engineering for investments to really improving value creation in the portfolio companies. That's a kind of multi-year shift happening in private equity. And if you think how you can improve companies today, data and AI is really central to that. So I think that's part of another thing that's driving investment and driving firms to try and figure this out. And then maybe a third factor, which I think is kind of an increasing one, is even now limited partners, LPs who are investing in private equity firms are beginning to ask how various investors are using data and AI. So yeah, it's pervasive. Many private equity firms at this point are experimenting and trying to figure this out and leaning into AI for sure.
And in terms of figuring it out, and I guess the title of this show is Unlocking Value, How Private Equity Firms Are Learning to Use Data Science. So I guess with that as the theme, if grade 1 is the start and graduation is kind of 10 out of 10, where would you say private equity is in that journey generally in terms of maturity of using data science?
Yeah, we were just talking about schools before we started, Jeremy, so I'm not sure if you're using the US system or the UK system there, but it's early. I mean, it's definitely early. As we're getting Baypine set up and getting started, I was really interested to get data and AI set up as kind of one of our very first value creation areas. So just even in my first year here, it was a priority. I spent some time, I went actually out and did a sort of informal study of what all the different PE firms are doing, and also just called a lot of the firms. I have the benefit of knowing most of our peer firms from being in the industry for a while. And as I talk to folks across private equity, the theme is I don't think anyone yet has cracked the code on exactly how to do this. There are a lot of places where they're trying to figure it out. They've hired people that have not worked out. They've built teams and then grown and shrunk the teams, and it is very much, I think, in a place where people are experimenting with it. I'd say why is that? There's a couple of key factors that are driving that. I think in a lot of cases, even if they can hire the right talent, which is always in itself a challenge, and Jeremy helped us do that at our firm, but hiring the right talent is definitely a starting point. I've seen firms hire people who just may know data science, but don't have enough industry context or private equity context to be successful. And so that's been, I think, kind of one of the stumbling blocks that's there. Another stumbling block I've really picked up from talking to other firms is just the kind of lack of integration between these use cases, these value creation initiatives, and the actual investment process. And For people who are not familiar with the investing process, it's at some level fairly simple. We look at a company and form a series of hypotheses about how we can improve the company before we even invest, and then we model those and think about what the financial impact of those initiatives would be, and that helps us figure out what we would bid, what the right price for the business is. But it also leads directly to the value creation initiatives and the kind of 100-day plan that you often hear people talk about in private equity. And if data science and AI is built into that, then it's fairly easy to kind of connect the dots between what you think could happen, the financial impact, and how to make it happen. Unfortunately, in a lot of firms, that's not the case. They set up data science teams, and the data science teams wind up working on projects that are sort of tangential. They're working on kind of projects that may not be really core to the value creation, and those sort of problems. And I think you put all that together, and you're at this state in private equity, I think, overall, where no one has sort of totally cracked the code on how to do this.
Yeah. So let's just delve into those two pieces you brought up then, because they're both quite interesting. So if you're a sort of a data scientist who might be looking to get into private equity, for example, is the message, or a private equity firm, I guess, is early in this journey, is the message that this is not just a discipline to focus on value creation post deal. This has to come in earlier than that to assess a potential investment, and then that then will lead on to more likelihood of success in terms of value creation.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I mean, I think to your point of like sort of integrated it early into the cycle is one thing. You maybe touched on another topic there, Jeremy, which was like if you're an operating partner, if you're or a data science professional and considering, like moving into a private equity firm, I think, understanding kind of private equity and or the specific industries the investor invests in, it's sort of like a Venn diagram almost of what you need to be successful. You need to know private equity, you need to know data science, obviously, and then ideally you need to know something about the industries or sectors that the firm is investing in. That's hard to find somebody who can really balance all three of those things and be successful. I can think of a very specific example of a firm that hired a very senior data science professional, very established person, was very specific with a couple of the industries that he knew. But ultimately, a year later, he wound up leaving the firm in sort of a high-profile exit. And it was because he just wasn't really tuned into how private equity operates and how the firm flows and so on. And he really struggled to get engagement with both the operating people and the investing people in the firm and with the portfolio companies they had. And I think that's been, kind of a common place where this sort of goes off the rails.
Yeah, and I think we've both seen that, and I know we've talked about that quite a lot off air. But why do you think that is? Why do you think it's difficult? Because a lot of people in the data and data science industry, there's a phrase of data is data, and they often use that as a sort of counter as to why you might need industry experience. So why is it so difficult for folks to move into private equity who maybe haven't got that experience and network prior?
Yeah, it's great. It's a great question. I think there's a couple of things. One is private equity is an industry all by itself. It's got its own terminology and customs and kind of flow and so on. I think people who move into private equity sometimes just underestimate, learning how all those things fit together, and even just being able to kind of communicate and build relationships with, the other investors at the firm. You have to keep in mind, if you go to a private equity firm, you're a little bit of a fish out of water. You're going to a firm that is 80 or 90% finance and investment professionals. And if you've kind of spent your whole career manipulating data and producing reports, you have to be able to connect with those people, explain what you're doing, show the value, and so on. And I think, a lot of people sort of struggle with that. The other one I would say is that there is sort of a pace in private equity. In private equity, the clock is running. So when you make an investment, most firms really look at the IRR, the kind of rate of return of making an investment. And that is all driven by how quickly that a company can be improved and you can sort of change the company. So from the moment the sort of gun goes off, that you start looking at a company and ultimately make an investment and then try to improve it, it really is a very fast-paced environment in that way. And I think sometimes people who may come from other industries where it's a little more relaxed sometimes struggle to keep up with the pace on these things. So yeah, there's a lot to learn, I think, going into private equity.
Yeah, great insights. So we've talked about talent, and we've talked about perhaps not applying data science to the investment process. Any other specific challenges, mistakes that you've seen that we haven't mentioned?
Yeah, just maybe one more. I think in this area, I think I see sometimes firms underestimate maybe some of the technical aspects of making this successful. I mean, what we've seen here at Baypine in two of our investments, at least, maybe all of them, is that just getting to a place, getting the data to a place, getting the technical systems to a place where it's even possible to begin some of these things has been a challenge. And even the data science people that I talked to and interviewed as we were, putting our team together, sort of echoed the same comment. They were a little surprised how much data gathering and cleaning and data management it took to even get to the starting blocks to be able to do things. And that has certainly, been our experience. The other thing I would say is, to set up a team and really grow it and scale it takes an investment in infrastructure and buying data sources appropriately and connecting with partners in the right way. And I do think some firms probably tend to underestimate that a little bit too. They think if we can just hire the right person, they'll be off to the races. And I do think firms, if they're going to build it and scale it, they have to be prepared to make the infrastructure investments to make it successful. So maybe a couple other things to think about there.
And do you mean on that sort of the data systems, data management piece? Do you mean internally within the firm or within portfolio?
Yeah, exactly. Within the firm, being able to set up the technical environments to make it successful. Some of the firms that are scaling, I can speak, to firms I'm familiar with here. They've invested in buying a number of data sources, integrating those in a way that they're kind of at people's fingertips and ready to use, and so on. A little bit back to the speed point. If we look at an industry and we're evaluating 2 or 3 companies that we might invest in, sometimes we would have only a week or 2 to make those investments. And if you're trying to figure out, at that starting point, what data do I need? Where do I procure it? How do I get it loaded into my system? You're sort of a step behind almost. Whereas the firms that, let's take an example of a firm that might do a lot of investing in consumer products, let's say. They would go out and buy and procure the right data sets they need to really understand that market before they even had a specific, company on the hook. We've done that at Baypine. We've bought some data, and we've also built some of our own internal tools, for example, in consumer, that let us scrape the web and get, trends and consumer sentiment and some of that sort of thing. We do that proactively. It's just running as part of our infrastructure here at Baypine. And I think that lets us just move really, really quickly when we see an opportunity to invest in consumer. And, you could apply that thing to, many industries, I think, for PE.
Yeah. Well, we've sort of, I guess we've touched on a lot of the challenges and maybe mistakes so far, but maybe a sort of good segue would be to now, if you could sort of frame the opportunity, speaking more positively about, and look, this is my fault. I guess we've been focusing on the negatives, but what is the opportunity for private equity firms with data science? Can you encapsulate that or frame that for us?
Yeah, look, I think at Baypine, our founding partner just wrote a paper on data and AI, and he sort of went back to the Bill Gates quote a little bit. The quote is, people tend to overestimate how much they can achieve in 2 years and underestimate how much can happen in 10 years. And I think we very much see AI in that light. It's going to be majorly transformative to how companies operate, how private equity firms invest. It's a really, really monumental shift. Now, having said that, it's peak hype right now for this stuff, for sure. But I don't think that takes away at all from the long-term impact that it's going to have. And so as a result, you ask kind of what the opportunity is, Jeremy. I think it's a really massive opportunity for both firms themselves and the portfolio companies. And that's why we're kind of leaning into to go after it. I wish I could put a number on it, but we're probably too early to be able to do that.
Yeah. And I don't know if you could speak, because when I speak to firms in the industry, you have a smaller percentage, let's say, who are looking to build their own capability, but probably more so firms that outsource to different agencies or consultancy. So, I mean, I don't know if you could speak to the sort of decision for firms to kind of build versus buy, if you like, and maybe what considerations, because I guess that's going to be different in the context of each firm and its goals and size, etc. But maybe what are the considerations that PE firms might have about whether they should build their own capability internally or not?
Yeah, yeah, it's a good question. The way we're thinking about it, maybe start there, is I think we're going to do a little of both, which is to say we're going to build a team here that will be, kind of a small, focused team that will help us drive strategy, identify use cases, build prototypes, that sort of thing, and then use that to kind of jumpstart and focus our efforts. And then we'll also work with a number of partners when we decide to scale things up and do larger implementations and so on. I don't think you would ever see, at least at our firm, us with dozens or hundreds of engineers working on it. It's just not, doesn't quite, fit our model. But by the other token, I'm just a firm believer that if you're going to lean into this, you need people in the firm who can at least be sort of the architects. They can identify these use cases and they can select the right partners and they can drive implementation and so on. So I think that sort of hybrid model of doing a bit of the thought leadership and strategy in-house, but using implementation partners is probably the right model for us. It's probably the right model, I think, for most firms. And it becomes, in my mind, a little bit of a, kind of a sliding scale, not binary of do you build it in-house or do you use a partner to do this over time. I'd also say the partner ecosystem is getting better. It's getting better, of course, in the AI and data front, but it's also getting much better in the private equity front too. There are a lot more firms out there today who know how to work with private equity, that can operate at the pace that private equity needs to operate at, that can protect all the confidentiality between companies the right way. So it's getting a little easier actually on the partner side to do some of this. In terms of how a company or a private equity firm might think about that, I think it goes, back to the use cases and what they're trying to do, how much the firm's trying to lean into AI. I think if you're going to really lean into it, you might index a little more on the internal team, versus if this might be a little more of a secondary consideration. But yeah, that's how we're at least thinking about the issue.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Cory. We've already had a number of questions come in, and we'll probably be going into the Q&A in about 10 minutes for everyone, but do keep your questions coming in. We'll deal with all of those. We'll try and get through as many as we can in the Q&A. For the last 10 minutes or so, Cory, maybe let's flick back to Baypine then and talk about the specific use cases that you've been focusing on. And I don't know to what extent you can go into the detail of those in the specific company, so keep it at a high level if you need, or whatever you feel appropriate. But yeah, I think it would be really interesting to try and sort of understand, at a more granular level, maybe some of the projects you've been focusing on with your portfolio.
Yeah, sure. Be happy to talk about a couple of those. Maybe a starting point before I dive into the specifics is to just mention that, our approach to this at Baypine is sort of a pragmatic approach where I think for most companies, they don't need to go out and invent a new foundational model. They don't need to go out and, invent a new way to train, a certain LLM or anything like that. Really, it's about finding practical use cases that can, impact the business. And 9 times out of 10, that means applying technology that exists, in the market and applying it into the companies. Not always, but in many cases. So to maybe just cite a few examples, we're investors in a business called Qualderm, which is one of the largest dermatology clinic networks in the U.S. They're piloting a system right now to help physicians to diagnose skin cancer. And by taking an image on their phone, they can enter a few parameters around the image, and that helps the physician make determinations about the severity and type of an issue that the patient might have. It doesn't replace the doctor, of course, but it's sort of a tool that the doctor can use to help make these things. That's real. That's happening today with patients at Qualderm. Another one that maybe is kind of more of a homegrown solution is we're investors in a business called Penn Foster, which is an online education business. It helps educate high school students and vocational students online across the U.S. They've built the system. They call it Ultron, I think after the Transformers movie or something. And they use Ultron it's an internal system, and they use it very early in the cycle when a new student signs up for their platform. This system sort of predicts the path of the student, how fast they'll progress, what the course progression should be. It also helps them kind of model what the value of that student will be as they pay for their courses over time. That's been hugely influential really across the business. It's helped them fine tune their marketing efforts. It's helped them fine tune their sort of onboarding efforts in the business. And they're about to enhance that. So it will also be used to personalize the student journey. So as the student goes from course to course to course, these models will help guide and steer the student through that. I mean, that's a system, again, that's been live for over a year now, and has had a multi-million-dollar impact already on the bottom line at Penn Foster. I mean, those are two examples. I could literally go on with another 10. I just made a slide on this a couple of weeks ago for another meeting, and we have this happening, really pervasively across all of our portfolio companies at this point.
Yeah. Let's. I mean, look, I know from chatting to audience prior to us going live, I think use cases is one of the most interesting things to people. So yeah, if you have got others to share, let's come back to those in a sec. But I had one question, which was, and I don't know whether you did this with Coldham and Penn Foster, but are those use cases that you mentioned, are those identifiable during the and I'm speaking generally here, for other PE firms, are those the kind of things that are identifiable as potential use cases and value creation drivers in an investment process, if you get that piece right?
Yeah. Yes is the answer. I mean, I wouldn't say that you could necessarily predict every single use case. Of course, as you get into the business and you learn the business, you'll uncover others that might be possible. But 100%, I mean, I think we look at these businesses and go into them really prior to the investment, sometimes even prior to identifying a company, and have a hypothesis about what those use cases might be. Like, this is not a specific Baypine example, but maybe a more like theoretical example here would be, it's really clear that a lot of these technologies are going to be hugely valuable in call center type applications or customer interaction type applications. Chatbots, of course, but even more sophisticated things to handle routing and answer questions and this sort of thing. So I think if you go in and you say, okay, we know that this is happening, and we look at a potential investment that has dozens or hundreds of people, in a contact center, it's a pretty obvious thing you can identify up front that we may not know exactly the steps we're going to use, but we can apply data and AI and automation to that type of business and get a benefit in return. And then, of course, as you get into the business, you're going to identify more specific things. So yeah, I mean, and even the two examples that I gave, Jeremy, those were things that we identified very early on with those companies that were going to be an opportunity to apply these things.
Yeah. And you mentioned Qualcomm. Is that a computer vision solution then?
It is. Yeah. Yep. It's a computer vision solution. It takes an image of the sort of lesion on the person's skin. The physician enters some other data that's based on their judgment of what's happening, and then it helps the physician categorize the exact condition that the patient has. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's just go back to use cases then. I know we're coming up to half hour, so we're probably getting pushed for time. We could probably sit here and talk through all 10, but maybe just pick out one other use case that's either been most impactful or you think is most indicative of what you're doing at Baypine.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a good example here. So here's another good one. We own a third business called Mavis, Mavis Tire. They're one of the largest automotive aftermarket and service businesses in the country. At Mavis, they were running a system, kind of a legacy system to control the back office, the actual shop. When you go in to have your car serviced, you walk up to the front desk and tell them what's wrong, and then they do the repair work on your vehicle. The system that ran that was a legacy AS400 based system. We've helped them totally revamp that system to a system they're internally calling MavOS, as sort of a play on Mavis. But think of it as a new ERP system that will essentially automate the operations within each store. One of the important things that's part of that is that this system has a sort of dynamic machine learning model for predicting traffic in the stores and therefore scheduling the labor that actually runs in the store. So if you think about operating dozens or hundreds of individual stores, your main cost at running those stores is the labor and trying to staff labor appropriately for each individual store. And so by having a more accurate way to forecast and manage labor in the store, it has a direct impact on the bottom line for the store. We've rolled this out already in a number of stores. The impact has been substantial, double-digit impact in terms of the impact. And we're going to this year continue rolling that out across the whole platform. That'll be an example of applying some of these, not exactly AI, it's more traditional machine learning type of models, but applying this in a really direct way to help them manage labor costs for the business.
Yeah. So I guess for any labor intensive business, that's that kind of use case is a pretty big deal, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You mentioned sort of, I guess this is a minute ago, traditional machine learning solution. So maybe that's a good segue into Gen AI, which we've got to talk about because it's what's on everyone's lips at the moment.
Yep.
Someone referred to Gen AI as a red herring, particularly in the mid-market recently. So I guess what's your view on Gen AI use cases, the potential for those, and kind of where we are at the moment in terms of leveraging Gen AI in private equity?
Yeah, I think there's already practical use cases for this for sure. I mean, we have one of our companies is using it already to refine their marketing efforts. So I'm kind of ticking through our portfolio here, but we have an investment in a business called Polywood, which takes recycled plastic and makes high-end outdoor furniture with that. They have hundreds and hundreds of SKUs, which is part of their attraction is that if you go visit them, you have a wide selection. But they advertise with thousands of ads based on selling chairs or tables or the various products that they have. We're using Gen AI to actually generate new ad copy dynamically for the marketing messages that they're putting onto Google, Facebook, and so on. So we've actually applied that already. We're using it there. Another use case is back to Penn Foster here for a second. We're piloting a system there that's Gen AI based that gives students feedback on their writing. So they have almost 750,000 high school students enrolled at Penn Foster. You couldn't obviously have enough teachers to critique all the drafts and writing with that many students. And so now we're able to give personalized feedback to the student when they submit papers and drafts based on Gen AI that is sort of critiquing and scoring and giving feedback to the individual student. So, I mean, yes, it's the short answer. There are Gen AI applications already today that we're seeing, and I think you're just going to continue to see more and more of those things.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, well, I feel like we could probably keep talking about these forever, but we are pushed for time as ever with these things. So let's go into the Q&A. So we've already got quite a few questions that have been asked. If you've got something on your mind, please put your questions down in the comments and we'll try and get to those over the next 10, 15 minutes or so. Let's go to first question from KK. KK, hope you're well. PE firms need senior professional help from practitioners who aren't just data scientists. I found that my experience as a CDO in multiple industries is useful in guiding portcos and PE companies and is invaluable for both. If the leadership is educated by senior practitioners, it changes the culture and helps these companies adopt data and AI faster and better. So less of a question, but yeah, what's your thoughts on what KK said, Cory?
Yeah. Well, look, I think it's hard to disagree with that. There is, I think, at our firm and at probably most PE firms, they're trying to educate people on data and make people more aware of what's possible and the technology solutions. And I think senior leaders who can help sort of bridge that gap, if you will, who can kind of understand the technology and the data science and the AI and then also kind of speak the right language for investment professionals. I could definitely, see that as valuable. So yeah, I would agree with that. Maybe the one caveat I might tack on to the end of it is our industry in private equity is you have to be able to show the results at the end of the day and actually tie it to a number. So we're kind of ruthlessly scored every year based on the returns of our investments, and so you have to be able to do a little bit of both. You have to be able to do the high level and help bridge the gap a little bit, but at the same time you've got to be able to translate that to real world output and ultimately a return. So
Yeah. And I guess I have a question to tack on to this, Cory, is how we talked about adoption kind of internally, but when you're working with your portfolio companies, who are sort of mid-market core economy businesses, do you find any challenges in terms of adoption within those portcos, or by the very nature of having partnered with you, are they kind of invested in the change?
yeah. When you say impediments, I'm not sure if you mean. I think you're kind of implying, Jeremy, like cultural resistance to implementation. And the answer is no, not really. I mean, that hasn't been an issue. I do think, to your point, there's a selection bias there because we're partnering with companies that want to go do technology changes. I think the impediments we found have been more back to what I was saying earlier about just ability to get the right data and be able to analyze it on the one end, and then on the other end, being able to kind of nimbly act on the results, I think is the other end. Sometimes you can generate these great insights, but if you're not able to change your product or revamp your process, then the insights are not helpful. So those have been more the impediments that we've seen versus some sort of cultural resistance in the portfolio companies.
Yeah, thanks, Cory. Got a question here, Sam Friedman. How do you think about the technical talent gap at legacy assets that Baypine is acquiring? What strategies are you leveraging to fill these needs?
Yeah, it's a great question. This is kind of a both an issue and an opportunity. I think for some of the middle market companies, particularly where we invest, Sam, your point is well taken. They often don't have talent in house who can help them navigate these things. The really big firms, the really gigantic companies do, but the middle and smaller firms don't. I actually think that's an area where choosing an investor like a Baypine that can bring the sort of capability to the company, it sort of speaks exactly to the point of why PE firms like ours are trying to build up this data science capability, because we can kind of navigate that a little bit initially by helping them do some of the work, and ultimately by kind of teaching them to fish, helping them think about what teams they should build and how they should hire and so on. So there is definitely a gap, and that gap is precisely what we're trying to address. So
yeah, and in my experience, I find that there might be more of a talent gap in the mid market, but there's probably less cultural resistance than there is at the bigger companies. So you kind of got swings and roundabouts, I guess.
Yeah, maybe less bureaucracy and inertia at the smaller companies. Yeah,
I think so. Diego asks, what steps would you recommend for someone with 15 plus years in data science, in insurance and information services looking to transition into private equity?
Yeah, great question. Couple of things. One is, I think it sounds like, Diego, you're already on this path, but one of the first pieces of advice I always give is for someone to just really double down on an industry. Most PE investors are very specific about what industries that they're investing in, and a specialist will always beat a generalist when it comes to interviewing for a job in those places. So whether it be, in your case, investment banking or hedge funds, in other cases it might be healthcare or consumer, whatever it might be, I think that's a really, really great starting point. Usually the best path into PE, specifically, I can't speak quite so much to hedge funds, is going to be through one of the portfolio companies. That's the path I took, how I came into PE, and I think that's probably the most common one. So if you can find a PE backed business, go there, spend a couple of years, help them be successful. You'll get noticed. The PE firm will notice that. And often that can lead to either roles at other portfolio companies or directly at the PE firm, which, yeah, once again, is exactly how, the path that I was on. That would probably be my best advice on that front.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. We've probably got another 10 minutes left here, potentially, everyone. So any more questions, please do get them in, put them in the comments down below as soon as you can. The next question from an anonymous user, do you guys, assume he's referring to Baypine, use a center of excellence model across your portfolio, or do you build data science, AI skill sets and groups within each investment?
Yeah, I'm not sure I totally understand this question. I guess what our plan is to do at Baypine, what our plan is to do is we will build are building a small team here at Baypine. I'm not sure if I would call it a center of excellence or not, but it's a small team of data science professionals. We just hired an amazing person to lead that, which Jeremy helped us find. And we'll be building out, over time around that. So we'll have a handful of people. Those people will act as the sort of architects. They'll help identify the use cases. They'll help choose the right partner. They'll help guide and educate the portfolio company. They'll be the kind of, I guess you might call that a center of excellence effort to do that. And then we'll work with partners to be arms and legs for the portfolio companies to implement the various projects. That's exactly what we've done. Several of the use cases that I mentioned earlier kind of followed that model. Ultimately, I think we do want to build the capability in the portfolio company. So, we'll also be helping them identify the right people and hire the people and so on. So yeah, eventually this will, we want to kind of make them self-sufficient over time and help them build the capability internally too.
Yeah. The same individual has asked a follow-up question, which kind of refers to what you just mentioned, Cory. Actually, if you follow the center of excellence model, what's the most important first hire to get to get up to speed as quickly as possible? So I guess he's referring to, if you are building a small team of experts internally, what are the considerations you need to have for that first data science hire?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. I mean, I had a little bit of this debate in my own mind about, should we hire a practitioner or should we hire a leader? To get started, we ultimately skewed, toward leader and hiring, a person to lead the team. I think that would be that would probably be the right place to start. I think sometimes people, firms, companies go the other way and hire a practitioner too. And it's a little harder in that model to figure out the use cases and get the buy-in that you might need at the company. So I would probably start top down, frankly, and hire somebody more senior to lead the group. The second thing I would say is I would go back to what I said earlier about industry specificity. If you're going to recruit somebody into a consumer business, even if they're great data scientists, they really need to understand the consumer industry in that case. They need to be able to understand the market dynamics, the data sets that are available, the business problems they're trying to solve. I don't believe you can just hire a generalist to dive in and be as successful as somebody who brought some level of industry knowledge would be to that role.
Yeah, a great bit of insight, I think. This is a good question, I think, from someone, anonymous user again. How do you manage expectations internally within your investment deal teams on the level of investment time needed to see value in data science initiatives? The question goes on, but I think that sort of first piece is a great question.
Yeah, it's a great question. Our managing partner showed a slide recently that sort of talked about the J curve of investment in our business, and it is true. Our expectations at Baypine are, if you think about the cycle of investing, we're going to invest in some ways more aggressively and make a deeper investment in the early days, in the investment, with the expectation that over the longer term that will generate outsized returns. So to be a little more specific, the average hold times for most private equity firms tend to be 3, 4, maybe 5 years, which is concurrent with the fund life for most PE firms. We've set expectations with our investors that instead of a 3 or 4 year hold time, they should expect a 5 or 6 year hold time for us, and that's something that we've, as an expectation, we've set with our own investors, and therefore kind of trickles down to our own internal investment deal teams at the firm. So it's something we've recognized and tried to kind of build our firm from the outset to address.
Yeah,
it's a good question.
Yeah, great question. Another good question, I think. So Austin Curtis asks, hi Cory, in your experience, how much of the use case focus has been on revenue acceleration versus cost optimization?
Yeah, it's another good one. In our case, we've seen a good blend. So we've seen, I don't know if it would be 50-50 or something, but we've seen use cases on both. So some of the examples I gave, like optimizing marketing or, which I mentioned, at Polywood and Penn Foster, those are revenue generating use cases for sure. On the other hand, some of the things I mentioned, like call center optimization and labor optimization, those problems are of course clearly more cost optimization. So we've seen both. I think most people start on cost. It's sort of easier. It's more controllable. Sometimes easier to get your head around. But I think what you're seeing in private equity in general, not just related to data science and AI, is more of a pivot to trying to figure out value creation initiatives on the revenue side. Again, aside from data and AI for a second, you see PE firms figuring out how to optimize pricing, figuring out how to build sales forces, those sorts of things. And the extension of data and AI into those domains, I think, is increasing, and it is a logical place for them to go.
Yeah. Any more? We've got probably 4 or 5 minutes, everyone. So any more questions, please do drop them in down below. But I think we're probably coming towards the end. Shout out to a couple of people. So I know Steve Budd is on the session today, and just a shout out to Steve because he runs the AI Pathfinder, which is an AI strategy quarterly breakfast for PE operating partners, and I think his next one is on December the 3rd in London. So please do, if you're in London, please do check out Steve Budd and AI Pathfinder. I know Cory's at the PEI Operating Partners event in New York next week, so anyone who hasn't sign up for that. And we just had one last question come in. Alex Moore, what's been Baypine's experience with leveraging digital to modernize and enhance portfolio management, monitoring, and forecasting?
Yeah, I love this one too. We're working on this at Baypine. The private equity is sort of a not trying to think of the right phrase. Like, it's not unlike other industries. The tools that are widely deployed in private equity probably need a little modernization overall, and we're thinking about that right now. So to give you an example, we're in the process of deploying a new portfolio monitoring system at Baypine. It's easier to do this when you've got 4 or 5 companies like we do versus when you get to hundreds. So we're trying to do it early. The system that we're deploying will use AI to ingest data from our portfolio companies. So the traditional model that PE firms use to collect data from their portfolio companies is they send them these very rigid spreadsheets that the companies have to fill out every week or every month, or they have a just horrific kind of web interface that the portfolio companies have to log on to. The system we're deploying will basically ingest anything: PowerPoints, PDFs, board decks, raw reports coming out from their various ERP systems, and will automate the ingestion and cleaning and kind of data management for those types of things. So that's kind of one specific example of what we're trying to do to eat our own cooking, if you will, in the firm.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks for the question, Alex. Well, let's finish up now, Cory. But just before we do, I always at the end just ask for a sort of top tip from a guest, I guess. And so, not to put you on the spot, but I guess it's one of those things. Imagine if you're a PE firm who is maybe really immature or has never used data science before as a value creation lever operationally within your portfolio. What are the first things that you should be thinking about to take your first steps on this journey?
Yeah, this is a little bit of a cold call, Jeremy. I would say just the probably the biggest top tip I would give is, to just be really thoughtful about what the use case is and being able to connect that to the investment thesis. It's easy to generate lots of pilots and generate lots of science experiments, but if you're not able to actually figure out which one of those is actually going to create bottom line value and then drive to completion with it, it's really not, using it to its full potential. So that would be my probably number one tip.
Great stuff. Well, that's a great way to finish. And yeah, look, Cory, thanks very much for this. Really appreciate it. It's been we've been very lucky to have you and the insights that you've given us. So good luck to you and Baypine for the future. And yeah, we'll see you again soon, I hope. And thanks for everyone for joining us. I hope it's been valuable, and we'll see you next time on Data and AI Live.
Thanks, Jeremy.